Hello, happy Wednesday, and welcome to Ask Wildman. My name is Miles Bassett. I'm the CEO and founder over here at Wildman Web Solutions. We're a digital marketing agency here in Lawrence, Kansas. And we put on this show every week, Wednesdays at 11, live streaming to our Facebook page and YouTube as a resource to you and our local community, hopefully to answer some questions. So this is an open Q&A for anyone and everyone who wants to involve themselves. If you have any questions about business, about marketing, about technology, or you just want to say hi, then jump in the comments below. You can follow this stream on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. Or if you're catching this later, you can involve yourself and ask us your questions by emailing us at askwildman@wildmanweb.com. I do have that address scrolling below me in this crawler here in case I forget to mention that enough times here. Okay, let's see if I can't press the right buttons here. Okay, here it comes. Mike, there we go. I've got way too many buttons
I am
pushed to get you on
here.
here.
Good
All
morning,
right.
Miles. Happy belated birthday, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
feels pretty much the same as the last one at this point, but made it one more time around that sun, and it was a good one. It was a nice birthday, good weekend. I'm happy.
Have,
I'm
have you
happy.
have you ever had a birthday on the day of the presidential election before, or was that a first time?
No, that's the first time. It's always been pretty close. I remember it being a little bit too close for I forget what the date was, but I was concerned on my 18th birthday that I was barely going to miss the cutoff and not be able to vote. I ended up getting it, but I remember
Oh,
thinking
yeah,
like, oh, I wasn't going to
yeah.
be able to vote in this first time, but just barely hit that. So no, this is definitely that was a first. Happy birthday to me. No one was paying attention to me, and rightfully so.
Right. Yeah, people were a little distracted yesterday, and really kind of, I think, all last week as well. So I for one, am quite glad. Well, I guess it's not over as as I glance up to the television screen here, but it's close to being over, is my understanding. So, uh, congrats to all of us for getting through that.
Indeed, agreed.
But I'm doing good. Glad to hear you had a great birthday, Miles.
Yeah. So let's get this show on the road. Like I said earlier, this is an open Q&A, so anyone who wants to just jump in and be part of the conversation, like this being more of a back and forth, less of a monologue. So throw your questions in the comments, or if you just want to say hi, put it in the comments, or you can email us at askwildman@wildmanweb.com. We'll try to address your questions, or if you've had some experience with something that we're talking about, feel free to throw your experiences in the comments as well, and we'll try to address those as they come. All right. Apologize if my audio is breaking up here. Actually, just before the show, we had a blip in the power, and it turned off everything for like half a second. And that includes my
Oh
router,
no.
which was restarting at like 10:55. So hopefully it's spun all the way back up and going. But if I cut out or something, that's probably why. Mike, just jump in and start talking about something interesting. Um,
Yeah, that could get dangerous.
Hopefully relevant and interesting. Interesting,
Okay,
relevant.
yeah,
Balance it there.
I'll do my best. That's a lot of pressure, especially
Okay,
today.
well, we're letting the questions, comments, and everything come in here. Do want to mention a couple of other resources because we are doing this show as a resource to our community, hopefully trying to put out some valuable information. We also have some more valuable information on our website. If you go to wildmanweb.com/articles, there's a whole blog there with articles that go into everything we're talking about here, from the tech side and web development and SEO over into content creation, blog writing, or working on social media, some basic design skills, nothing crazy deep there or anything, but some nice shallow dives into a lot of different topics. And we do cite our sources on all of the different articles. So you can link out to all those different things and use that as a launch point to really learn about some of the things that we're talking about up here. So feel free to go to our website, wildmanweb.com, and then click on that articles section to learn. Or if you want something a little bit more interactive, we're also still offering our toolkit, wildmanweb.com/LBOT. That stands for Local Business Online Toolkit. It's a suite of software that we offer to our clients and to people in our community, though people can really use it anywhere. It's just a couple of different tools to help you to manage your business online. So there's a tool in there to help manage your listings, to get a hold of your reputation and reviews. There's one to help manage your social media platforms and all of your different accounts. A bunch of different analytics and stuff on there to just sort of give you a better idea of what your business is doing online, and hopefully make some of that a little bit less of a chore. So feel free to sign up there at wildmanweb.com/LBOT. Otherwise, just follow us at Wildman Web on our social media. Like I said earlier, we are streaming live to our Facebook page right now, as well as our YouTube channel. So pick your poison there, pick whichever one you want, watch us, and throw your questions in the comments here. Now, I wanted to start off with a really interesting conversation I had this morning, actually, at 1 Million Cups Lawrence. If you guys haven't attended 1 Million Cups yet, I highly recommend it for all business owners. It's just a fun little community. They meet every week, at least here anyway. Depending on your town, there's different instances of it all across the Midwest. So check and see if you have a local one. I know that I've been to the Topeka one, to the Manhattan one, and to the Kansas City one as well. But basically, they meet and they have a presenter or two of local businesses that go there. They say, hey, this is what I'm doing. They'll take questions, and it's really meant to be, less of a sales pitch to one another and more of a networking group where everyone's just there to help out, and you get a lot of really great information. But I had a presentation this morning of a guy who was trying to do virtual live events using a video game engine. He had created sort of these virtual rooms, virtual spaces, one that looks like a classroom and one that looks like more of a conference or some sort of, I don't know, they had like booths and tables and everything, this sort of event center, virtual event center. And then you drop yourself in there as a virtual avatar, like you're playing a video game, and then you could go around and interact with people and talk with people as if it were a live event. I thought that was really cool, especially missing some of those business-related networking events that I used to go to before the world melted around us and pandemic clock happened, as well as some of those social events. Parties, concerts, events like that. So I wanted to kind of get an idea of what your thoughts were on that, Mike, what you think about live events and where that's going.
Well, that's a good question, Miles. You were cutting out there a little bit, but I think we heard most of that. And maybe it's just me that's having some issues cut with hearing your audio there. But yeah, first and foremost, 1 Million Cups, great organization. Everybody should go check it, whether you're in Lawrence or not. Miles was saying they have chapters all over Kansas, all over the country, and a great way to network and also just get ideas about what others are doing in their businesses and in business in general. And so live events, of course. I guess I don't know if it's arguable or not, but I was going to say probably the most disrupted industry from COVID-19. Certainly was the first one to really get the axe, so to speak. As I remember the day that Seattle announced they banned all events over 250 people. That was I think early on there in mid-March, was one of the first kind of like, whoa, what the heck's going on here? And everybody kind of set up and take notice of how this was going to change our lives. Out, of course, it was just a big domino effect that really has crippled the industry. You know, this was an industry that I was deeply involved in. So, you know, first and foremost, my heart goes out to everybody who's in this industry, because it's been an incredibly taxing time. And to really answer your question, Miles, is we don't know at this point. You know, we don't know when things to in-person events on a large scale, and it's obviously creating a whole lot of hardship for those people, stakeholders in this industry, and of course for all the rest of us who just, you know, love going to live events. It's part of our human connection, and you know, as a culture and a species. And so, you know, it's been hard on all of us, but you know, certainly those stakeholders are really worried, you know, right now, still, you know, 8-9 months into this thing. And so the great thing, there's the bad news, Miles. Here's the good news: is there's been a whole lot of amazing ingenuity, you know, of just amazing ideas and persevering forward. You know, with a lot of people in this industry, and I think that's what you were kind of getting at with the gentleman there at Wildman. People have found new ways to innovate and new ways to hold events, new ways to do things virtually, and at least it's become a way, you know, to keep some connection in a world where physical connection has been very hard to come by, you know, over the last 8 months. So where this is going specifically is, I think that there's going to be a lot more investment in virtual technology in order to bring people together in events, whether it be musical concerts or conferences or things like that. And while we don't know what's going to happen next year with COVID, I think that the benefits of having your event online have been shown to be proven. Speed wins, convenience wins, and accessibility wins. And I think that, you know, as we've talked about a little bit, just in the way business culture has changed, you know, I think that a lot of people are going to think twice about hopping on a plane 3 days out of the week and flying all over the country to hold a business meeting. And the same could be said about, you know, the event world. You know, are people going to be more apt to hop on a plane and either go across the country for a pleasure, for a concert, or for a business conference, and instead schedule 2 or 3 other things where the really interesting mix is happening, and where the gray area is, and that's why I can't really give you a solid answer, because I'm still watching how all that is going to play out. And one thing sure is, you know, I think, at least in my mind, that those virtual events, those live events, and the aspect of that is going to play some role in perpetuating. I stayed up too late last night. In, you know, in the long term, regardless of what happens with COVID. So I guess that's kind of my answer, is that I don't know. I mean, I hope personally, you know, God willing, that concerts are back and major festivals and conventions and all of those things are back as soon as next summer. I can tell you on the ground that, you know, those in the know don't think that. You know, most people think it's going to be next fall at the earliest, before all that comes back, and now we're having that's not going to be the case. So I don't know, but you know, as far as investing in a technological infrastructure in order for you to have a virtual event for your business or your community, or your organization, I think that's extremely smart, because, like I said, I think that this is going to be a cultural shift, and that people will, not that people won't, you know. And let me preface this a little bit. When concerts come back, when festivals come back, when big conventions come back, there's going to be a huge spike in people wanting to go out and do those things. because we've been, we've neglected, we've been starved of human interaction, for so long on a mass scale, that the energy that is created when you get a whole bunch of people together, that people are going to crave that, and they're going to go out and they're probably going to consume more and more of that. I'm talking about maybe what happens more in the next 3 to 5 years. What happens right after, there's going to be an explosion of people wanting to go back to in-person events. And then I think there's going to be this gray area is going to settle back in. Maybe I'm not going to send my sales team halfway across the country for this convention. Maybe I'll just have them meet with 5 other people here and attend the convention online. And so that's going to be really interesting to me. But we've seen people like Facebook, who are obviously huge participants in the marketing of live events. We've seen them offer some new tools that we've talked about here on the show before, repeating again, and that is things like paid events that you can host online, where Facebook can put up a paid wall for your event, and you can host that right on the platform and make money from it. So those are things that are coming down the pipeline. I think that there's going to be a lot more of that. But as we've talked about before, the best out this kind of infrastructure on your website, something that you control and not rely on a platform like Facebook to come in and save the day, so to speak. But I think that this whole thing, even this whole conversation, even translates into just how business is going to be done. And I'd like your perspective on that, Miles. I mean, I don't see people working in a traditional office 5 days a week anymore. And especially in the bigger cities where the costs are so high, and I spend all this time commuting. My brother works for a financial firm in Chicago, and he used to commute 2 hours a day, not that far, but from where he lived just outside of downtown Chicago into downtown Chicago, and he took the train. It took him about an hour each way. And then since COVID, he hasn't been taking the train. He hasn't been traveling at all. He's been working almost exclusively from his house, and he's got to get a lot more. So the productivity level is shifting as people are being taken out of this traditional office space. And so I see that kind of mentality all perhaps happening in the live event space as well. And so that's why this discussion to me goes out a little bit farther than just, well, when's COVID going to be over? Which, of course, nobody knows the answer to. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Miles, because to be honest, you were cutting out there while you were answering it. But hopefully we got your audio back on point, and jump back in and tell me how I did answer that question for you.
That's pretty much where I was going. I really just wanted to open a discussion around this. And my thoughts around live events and changing the work environment, changing the workspace kind of comes back to just this idea that necessity is the mother of invention, and that this really has created that necessity. I think that, similar to you, I think that this is we're going to see some effects here that long outlast the upfront cause of the pandemic. I think that there was a lot of hesitancy up front before all of this happened to virtual events, and to just holding a meeting over Skype or over Zoom or something like that. There was a lot of people who would not do that, who saw that as a lesser form of communication, and then all of a sudden they're forced to do it. And now I think that there's going to be a lot less resistance to that type of meeting space, the less traditional workspace. I've been working remotely for years at this point. Even before starting Wildman here, I was working remotely for years before that. And it's much more of a standard in my industry, in the software development industry, than probably most other industries to have remote workers. So I was a little bit privileged there to get a sneak peek, and to kind of be used to this world before I really needed to. And I was an advocate for that non-traditional workspace for before all this happened. But I knew a lot of people that said, like, no, you can't do that. You can't do this job remotely. People are not going to be productive working from home. There's too many distractions. Though there are many studies saying otherwise, even before all this happened, there was still a lot of hesitancy there. And it kind of makes sense to a certain degree. I mean, even you and I were having conversations again before all this happened about having virtual meetings and the efficacy of having in-person meetings versus the speed and convenience of having these virtual meetings this way. And I know that a lot of people that I talked to really hated doing that, but then they got forced into it and now they love it. They wouldn't do it any other way. So I think we're going to see some lasting
Hmm.
effects in that way. More people are going to be working remote after this. More people are going to be having virtual meetings. And then, yeah, maybe that can kind of bleed over into the live event space with technologies like the one that I saw this morning, as well as the adapting technologies, the growing technologies allowing for large conference style meetings. Zoom has been doing a whole lot. Skype has
Sure.
been changing a whole lot. We got Microsoft Teams playing in there. We've got, we use Google Hangouts
Hmm.
a lot, or I guess Google Meet isn't that what it is now.
Google, yeah,
Um,
that's what they call it now. Yeah.
Regardless,
Well,
they've all been just like
this,
sprinting forward, and I think that that's not going to change anytime soon. We're going to see a lot more people operating in that way, and using that in lieu of traditional live events and live meetings.
yeah. Well, this is it reminds me of something too that we talked about on the show a few months ago. And by the way, your audio is much better now. Uh, and that was one of the executives at Salesforce said, and this was maybe back in May or June. I was listening to him on a podcast, and they said at Salesforce that they've been analyzing, what people had shifted in terms of their behavior from the non-digital world to the digital world, and they said that COVID was advancing basically digital usage and digital adaptations by 5 years. You remember that, Miles?
Mhm.
I mean, that is really outstanding, and I think the longer that this is dragged on, the more that is being evident. I mean, I remember when I first heard that, my mind was blown. I was
Just to
like,
put a scale on
"My
that too, this
God!"
isn't like any other industry. 5 years is light years at this point. I mean, the digital
Hmm.
agency or digital industry develops faster than anything on the planet. I mean, imagine where we were
Right,
5 years ago. In 2015, what was
right,
your phone
and
like? What was your computer like? What was your work life like?
yeah,
I mean, there's been so many
yeah, yeah,
advancements. And then 5 years before that, back in
totally,
2010,
yeah, so totally. So
I think I
in
still had
in
a
in
flip
five
phone.
months, we right. So in 5 months, we accelerated 5 years. That's pretty incredible to think about. And then I think the other thing that really connects this discussion that we really haven't talked about, but I think it's quite prevalent to this on numerous levels, are this whole idea of lockdowns, right? Like we've never experienced that in at least in this continent, in Asia and stuff like that before, but it's never happened over here. And so if I'm a business person, be thinking, well, can my office get shut down again? Right? Can my factory get shut down again? All of these things, which before COVID, nobody had thought. And of course, we were thrown right into the middle of because we were some of the first people that people called when all this was happening was like, holy, you know what? Uh, I can't have my office open. I need to have things, digitally done and virtually done. And then if I extract that conversation out to something like a live event, which is really easy for me to do because I have a live event planned that was supposed to happen, this past August 2 months ago, and now it's planned for August 2021. Well, okay, obviously that takes a lot of investment, monetarily and time in order to put on something like that. So our event stakeholders, I'm already, plan B. Okay, let's, can we hold this thing outside instead of inside? But plan C has got to be what happens if this whole thing gets shut down. I have to have a virtual event, right? And so to me, the whole aspect of having virtual options is also just a backup plan point. And it's not some pie in the sky. Hey, let's try something crazy and see if we can go on the interwebs. It's like, I better have this thing in my toolkit. I could go out of business. That's what how it's accelerated in a really, really short time, which to me is quite amazing.
Yeah, things have been developing in a lot of ways that we wouldn't necessarily have predicted, at least not for a long time. I do think that it's going to change how we do business. Pretty much no matter how this thing develops over the next couple of months, we're going to see massive adoption of virtual events, virtual meeting styles, more and more of this in the years going forward. You see, Jeff commenting here. Hello, Jeff. Thanks for tuning in. I saw a stat today that 1 in 2 people that were forced into working from home will not be going back to an office when this is over. And it's that exact sentiment that I was trying to hit on earlier. Is a lot of people that maybe couldn't have even imagined working like this before. They just, knee-jerk reaction said, no, I can't have a meeting like that. No, I can't work like that. No, I can't run my business like that. And then now you're forced into it and you realize, I love this. I'm more productive when I work from home. I don't have that hour-long commute. Like, man, just that. I remember I was working in Kansas City at the time, but still living here in Lawrence years ago and commuting in, and that burnt 2 hours of my day every day. And when I got to work from home, that instantly bought me 2 hours a day. And I don't know how much your time is worth or how you really value that monetarily, but I mean, by some math, that's worth a pretty significant raise, basically, annually. So I think a lot
Yeah,
of
well,
people are really starting to do those kinds of
that's
calculations and realizing what this mode of work is actually getting you.
another great point, Miles. And again, I think that this is going to be part of this whole cultural shift that we're going in. I mean, think about a town like Lawrence. To me, this positions a town like Lawrence to really benefit from something like this, because as we know, the drawback to living in Lawrence, since I can remember going back several decades, but there's not enough jobs, right? Not enough jobs. It's more expensive to live. There's not near as many jobs as compared to Kansas City, right? And so, great example of the commuters. We've long been thought of as a bedroom community where I think over 30% of the workforce commutes outside of Lawrence every single day. And that's been one of the driving factors of major cities' growth, right? Is that people move there for jobs, and they maybe don't necessarily want to live in a big city. They'd like, the feel of a college town or a suburb or the countryside or something like that where they can spread out, but they don't want to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours away every single day to go to work. Okay, well now this has changed, and now I can have my office job in downtown Kansas City, Missouri, that pays me a lot more than presumably I would find in Lawrence, and I can live and work or I can live and work in Lawrence. So this, to me, is actually a big opportunity for some of these towns that are on the side of the top 30, 40 big city market centers. And so if I'm on the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, the Lawrence City Commission or something like that, my gosh, I would be thinking of all kinds of ways to attract those people to live here that are wanting to get away from the big cities. So that's just a little side a little sidebar there, but I think that that's an interesting discussion, and I'm really looking forward to how this all plays out over the next couple of years, because I do think that there's a big shift happening.
I hadn't even really thought about it that way, but yeah, that could lead to a shift in geography and in demographics. I
Oh
mean, this
yeah,
could be
I have
a
so many
societal
friends.
shift.
Yeah, I have so many friends that went to KU that would love to live in Lawrence, but they live in Kansas City or Portland or Denver or somewhere because of their job. You know, so yeah, it's really interesting. I think how that's going to play out. Just man, if I can get more house and it's cheaper to live somewhere else, and I can still have my great paying job that I had in the city, I
And
think that's
all
going
of
to make
that
some
money
people
comes,
think twice.
and then all that money comes here, comes to Lawrence, comes to the other communities like us, and boosts that local economy. So that could lead to
Well, if they
lots
facilitate
of
it
other
correctly, you're right.
opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That does
Right.
kind of lead us to I mean, if we can kind of shift a little bit into our next section of conversation. And I know that you and I were having a conversation about the local economy and how things are, bouncing back or not, and what kind of metrics we should be looking at. But were definitely some promising signs and some definite positive economic numbers just looking here locally and sort of the surrounding region. Did you want to bring some of those up?
Yeah, definitely. So there was some positive numbers nationally and locally and across the state that came out last week, and yeah, I figured, golly, we need some good news to talk about. so let's bring this up and talk about it on the show, since we were discussing it in the office ourselves, because it's over the since March, it's been, golly, nothing but doom and gloom. Every time you turn on the news, certainly any kind of economic news that has been going out there. And the long and short of it is, I think that the economy is starting to recover a lot quicker than we anticipated. And so that's obviously great. I don't think we're out of the woods here yet. And like we just talked about for the last half hour, there's a huge cultural shift happening here in terms of how people do business and how people just interact. So there's going to be majors and winners and losers still through this whole thing. But nationally, we had third quarter GDP numbers, the highest that they'd ever been. 31%. Of course, that was right after the second quarter had been the steepest decline in history. So we have to keep this in the big picture. But I don't think that anybody thought that the economy was going to bounce back that fast in third quarter after what we saw, the colors that we saw in second quarter. So certainly some really, really positive numbers there that are going to continue into fourth quarter and into first quarter of next year. And then locally here in Lawrence, Journal World, our friend Chad Lawhorn put out an article last week. Let me pull it up here so you guys can check this out. But basically, he was going over the sales tax numbers, and we get local sales tax numbers month by month, of course, here, but they usually have a 2 or 3 month lag in them in terms of what we find. But the bottom line is that the sales tax numbers were up much greater than we thought that they were going to be based on projections from first and second quarter. And the interesting thing was, in August, sales tax numbers here locally in Lawrence actually went up 3.5% compared to last year. So that is quite shocking if you think about it. That sales tax numbers actually went up 3.5% in this August compared to August of 2019. Now, some of that could have been, this pent up demand. Maybe people just were putting off purchases and things like that in June and July, and so that's what made August so big. We don't know. I'm really, obviously rooting for that trend to continue through the next coming months here as we get a better look at third quarter and then going into fourth quarter. Now, the numbers overall are still down, but they're not near as down as much as we thought. And I should actually have prepared this a little bit better, Miles, and pulled up the projection numbers from 6 months ago. But I remember double-digit projections across the board locally for the rest of 2020, and so that somebody can maybe check me on that and make sure I'm not exaggerating. But I'm pretty sure that that's what we were told to expect, is there was going to be double-digit declines for the rest of the year. And so obviously, if we're only now down, I think 3% overall, then that's a significant increase in what we were supposed to expect. So We're not going to start jumping up and down and popping champagne maybe quite yet, Miles, but certainly there's some great trends here that is leading me to believe that this recovery is going better than expected. And so from as I put out in our newsletter on Friday, by the way, if you haven't signed up for the Wildman web newsletter, you're missing out, and you should do that. Miles will probably put up on the do that. But I discussed that if you've been sitting on the sideline the last 7 months and you haven't been investing, you haven't in advertising, you haven't been customers to come do business with you, you haven't been innovating new and better ways for people to do business with you, your competition probably has been doing that, and the consumers are starting to spend. So you don't want to be behind. You don't want to be lagged behind. As we talked about last week, it takes 60 to 90 days on average to talk to somebody about what them to do before they actually do it. So if you're like, well, I'm just waiting until first quarter next year, you're missing out on a big opportunity here, market share from the competition. So that was the big macro takeaway. But there's one more that I want to dig into and dissect a little bit, and this could be kind of read, either way, I guess, as positive or local economy. But Miles, the good news is that Wildman Web Solutions is here to make it a positive going forward, and not. And what I'm talking about is our use tax numbers. It's a special sales tax. For those of you who don't know what a use tax is, but it's a special sales tax that is collected on online or e-commerce, sales, or basically anything that happens online from an outside business. So it's money that's being spent online from a business outside of Douglas County. And we've been talking about this number for a long time. I don't know if anybody else has, but our good friend Chad there at the Journal World has pointed this out in his article, which I urge you to go and read this entire thing. But this number has been exploding, pre-COVID, during COVID, and whatever this period is now. And the latest report, again, it is way up. It is up 17% increase compared to the same period a year ago. Say that again. 17% increase over the same period a year ago. So the good news is that the sales tax collections are up 8.2%, which is more than $200 compared to the same year ago. So in terms of our local governing budget, which had been, projections were just going to be completely shot apart, this is going to help that. And we're hopefully not going to have as much of a raging deficit as we were once projected. But I think there's a lot to unpack there with that number and that stat in general. And I want to throw it back over here and get your take on it here in just a minute, Miles. But to me, like I said, you could read that a number of different ways. I mean, the good news is people are spending, right? They're spending a dramatic amount more than they were even last year when the economy was at the greatest that it's been in history, right? So that's amazing. But that's money that is not being spent in person-to-person retail in downtown Lawrence or other areas of Lawrence, right? And so you could think of it as it's taking away from that spend, which as we noted is down overall, but it's up compared to a year ago. But this, as we've said before, this is all part of this micro conversation that we were having in the big part of the show of how the cultural change is changing habits and changing the way the business is done and changing the way that consumers interact with businesses. And as we've been telling people, it's all becoming much more digitalized. It's all becoming much more online. And people are seeing the speed and the convenience and everything that they can get by not having to leave their house and go shopping for 2 hours and sitting down and doing it in 20 minutes on the internet. And then going about and getting much more other things done with their day. And that's a trend that, as we said before, and as they point out in the article, it's not going away. It's not slowing down. It's not even new. This has been happening for years now. again and again and again. And this, I think, really just kind of draws the exclamation point on it because it's happening in the middle, still in the middle of a pandemic. So, again, everybody go check that out. Our good friend Chad, who, if you're not familiar with Chad, he makes jokes. We don't ask him to, but he makes jokes. So the end of this, I'll just read the last three lines here from him. This is a quote from him. Um, the overall used sales tax collections in the state are up by 18% for the year compared with the same period a year ago. This has resulted in about 26 million in new tax revenues for local cities and counties. This internet thing may be here to stay. Indeed, it is, Chad. Indeed, it is. So obviously, just a little sarcasm there from Chad at the end. But before I turn this back over to you, Miles, let me tie this back into how Wildman helps the situation. Is that, as we talked about before, I talked about the Journal World article I saw, downtown retailer that was, convinced that he couldn't have an online store because then he would join the bad guys, and it's us versus them. It's you're either an in-person retailer or you're an online retailer. Um, it's not too late. It's not too late for downtown businesses, for all local businesses, here in Lawrence, across the state, across the nation, to offer the same kind of service that the big retailers are doing online. Just because you were late doesn't mean the party's over. You can still show up to the party, and you need to. You need to get in the game, and you need to have, as much as you can possibly offer online. You need to have it as convenient and as easy as you possibly can. Maybe that means getting a mobile app or something that you thought was crazy 9 months ago. But this trend is not going to stop, and it's only going to continue, and it's only going to make local businesses lose out who aren't availing themselves to the same kind of tools and the same kind of convenience that consumers are not just coming to expect, but demanding from the businesses that they spend money with. So, Miles, I'll turn it over to you. What do you think about all that?
Well, I think that sounds like an overall much more positive take on the economy, both nationally and locally, than I think any of us really expected. I'm really curious to see where these trends go because, no matter what we're talking about in local sales or the economy, or if I'm looking at SEO or digital marketing, something, we're always looking at these long-term trends, not necessarily spikes or dips, these little flukes that can find their way into a system. The average trend is really what we're going to look at. So I'm really curious to see where some of these things go and how it ties into some of the stuff that I've been looking at. And that's been primarily tied to e-commerce and how businesses are interacting and engaging with their customers digitally, how they're doing that virtually, and how some of those things have switched or how they've changed. I'm really curious to see how the next couple of months go, how the holidays go, because there's a lot of trends that have been pretty standard for decades at this point, that are being completely turned on their head. Things like holiday shopping, Black Friday, all of the numbers around that are just completely backwards. Something like 51% down as far as overall interest in Black Friday as a whole for the average consumer. People are caring less and less about some of these traditional events and ways of engaging with businesses, especially surrounding the holidays. There's been some polls out there saying more people are trying to shop locally these holidays and try to pull themselves off of large online shopping centers like Amazon and eBay. More people are being much more conscious about that and opting to shop locally. There's also a couple of other things as far as businesses engaging with their customers that I've seen that are interesting. I don't necessarily know how they're going to turn out, but it's enough to grab my attention, and that is the overall success of businesses with loyalty programs seems to be tied pretty directly with the increase of online traffic and increase of
Yep.
e-commerce market share. Loyalty
Yep.
programs seem to be like almost like you look at the two graphs and they're almost exactly the same over the entirety of this whole shutdown pandemic thing. So I'm not entirely sure how those two are tied together, but it really seems like there's a close correlation in those companies that are doing well and those that have some form of customer loyalty program. Another one that I've seen has been companies that have some sort of trial period or like a try at home kind of thing. I'm thinking of like the mattress companies that'll send you the mattress and you get to try it for 100 days and then
Wayfair.com, yeah, all
exactly
those places. Yeah. Hmm.
companies that have that kind of
Yep.
at home trial have just been killing it in all of this versus
Yep.
their
It,
competition.
DTC in general, sorry to interrupt, with DTC in general, to your point, direct to consumer exploding across the board, and e-commerce as well exploding across the board, led by DTC brands. Go ahead.
Yes, and overall traffic to e-commerce sites is up across the board. E-commerce as a share of the overall market is way up across the board. So basically, what I'm saying here, I guess, is if you want to take advantage of some of the increases that we are seeing in our local economy, some of the increases that we are seeing in the national economy, and with the upcoming holidays and sales and Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all that stuff, if you really want to capitalize on that, there's seeming to be a couple of trends that are coming out, and that's not pushing for a Black Friday sale, that's not pushing for the holiday sale, some of these more traditional marketing tactics, but instead pushing for e-commerce, pushing for some form of loyalty program and some sort of content engagement that way. And then also, if it's at all possible, some sort of trial period where people are able to engage with your product directly without leaving their own home and still staying in that sort of virtual e-commerce space. And that means something wildly different to people across the board, whether that's samples or some sort of trial period or I don't know, kind of depends who we're talking about. But if you can leverage that kind of idea where you're engaging your customer in a smaller, more regular, and very tangible way through your online presence, then that's seeming like that's going to be the winning strategy here.
Yeah, great points, Miles. I think it would be really prudent as well to conduct some polls with your audiences. Right now,
Yeah.
I would be conducting some kind of user research polls, whether that's on social media or email list or in store, whatever, and asking people point blank, how are your consumer behaviors changing? What would you like to see? What would make it more convenient for you, et cetera, et cetera. And that ties into a couple things that you said there in terms of loyalty. As we talked about before a couple times on this show, the data is showing that consumers are more loyal to their brands that they previously were consumers with than ever before during this pandemic. And so, if you're going to be taking new market share from somebody, to me, it really has to come down to either you're making an incredible offer, like yeah, try it for 30 days, and if you hate it, send it back and full refund, right? Or your incredible convenience is what you're offering over your competition, or a combination of the two, which something like Wayfair.com is or some of those other direct to consumer. I know there's other ones. That's the Overstock.com. There's a bunch of them. Those combine both of those aspects, right? Because the idea is that it's more convenient than me driving to Nebraska Furniture Mart or some big furniture mall and taking all afternoon to walk through 1,000 square feet. And so the fact that I can order online, it can show up at my house, and if I can get a better deal, and if it's less risk, oh, you'll give me a refund if I don't like it, and somebody will come pick it up. See where this is going, folks.
Hey,
And
that's paired with another stat that I had over here, and that was that more people are likely to stick with the brands that they tried during the pandemic then return to the ones that they were using previously. So as we talked about previously on this
Mm,
show, retention has kind of surpassed conversions at this point. So people are being much more brand loyal, but also there's a sect of the population that's been trying new stuff, trying new ways of engaging with businesses, trying new brands
right.
during the pandemic, and that demographic seems like it's kind of skewing younger people are out there experimenting a little bit more and trying some new companies, trying some new brands. And of the people that are experimenting and are trying new ways of doing business and experimenting with new brands, it was something like 70-80% of them have said that they're going to stick with the companies that they had tried during the
Mm,
pandemic rather than returning to the way that they were doing things before that. So if you can leverage some of the strategies that Mike was just talking about and get someone to try your stuff, it's seeming like people are really sticking with that, and that's going to end up being, a longer term win than just getting someone for the course of the shutdown.
yeah, that's a great point, Miles. I've seen that those stats as well, and that all ties back into the direct to consumer brands. Those a lot of those brands are the ones who they got their shot. You know, they got their at bat because the other store was closed, or people didn't want to deal with going out in public or what, and so they were online and they got their shot, and then that all ties back into the discussion that we had the last few weeks about your marketing bridge, because at that point it's just all about delivering, and if your marketing bridge is succinct and you do a good job, you have an amazing opportunity right there to take a customer away and keep them and retain them. And yeah, there's never been a better time to be a direct to consumer brand or to be an online e-commerce brand than the last 6 months. And the ones that were prepared and the ones that were able to execute are certainly going to come out on top.
And though we may be seeing some huge spikes in some of those huge online retailers, obviously Amazon's breaking records all over the place, and some of those bigger ones, Wayfair and Overstock and things like that. And then we are seeing some new big boys coming into some of the industries, things like I don't know, Carvana coming in and being that home delivery car sales service. Which, if you would have asked me a couple years ago if that would be a thing, I would say hell no.
Right.
But while some of those big boys really are taking advantage of some of this, that also means that there is that opportunity for small businesses as well. If you leverage some of those same ideas, some of those, I mean, not everything and as much as they are doing or anything, it's not necessary. But if you kind of move your marketing in that direction and take advantage of some of these new strategies and new methods of doing business, then there's a slice of that pie ready and available for you too.
That's a great point too, Miles. And Amazon is so interesting to me as a case study in this, because to me, both. I mean, it's obviously a giant corporation, right? And I mean, it's one of the biggest, and it's one of the most innovative. They've unleashed, I can't remember in how many cities, right? Groceries delivered to your door in 2 hours, and all these incredible game-changing innovations, which are consumer centric heavy, right? It's like advantage consumers, disadvantage big box store, non direct to consumer business models. But at the same time, Amazon is made up of tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of small businesses. And inside of Amazon are thousands and thousands of small, tiny, solo entrepreneur businesses who are absolutely crushing it right now with direct to consumer, with affiliate links, with drop shipping, with all of these things. And they're using Amazon as the infrastructure, smartly, rather than taking the cost to build it out, or as an add-on. They have their own e-commerce store, but they also sell on Amazon. And I don't think that story gets told as much, at least in the headlines. But how many new businesses have been started this past 6-9 months just on Amazon? I guarantee you there's tens of thousands of them. And again, if they have their unit one together, they're probably doing quite well. um, so really, really interesting stuff. And I know we've taken the whole show to dive in and discuss this stuff and not answer anybody's questions. But it's really, really fascinating stuff to me. And as much of a son of a bitch this whole year and COVID has been, it's we've at least been getting some interesting things to discuss and some interesting problems to tackle out of it, Miles. So never a dull moment, right?
Normally, I'm the numbers guy, so I'm happy to see you diving into some actual math and percentages and stuff. It
Yeah.
is refreshing from this end of the room here.
Economics is the only kind of math that I enjoy because it deals with human action. It's
Right.
not just ones and zeros.
Well, we are coming to a close here. This was a little bit different show today, I think, but we did hit some, I think, pretty important points in here. So if you think any of that was important or valuable or whatever, help us by liking and sharing this video, getting it out to as many people as possible. We are trying to provide this as a resource. So the more you like and share this, the more people we can get in front of, the more questions we can answer, and hopefully the better resource we can be to our community here. So help us out that way. If you do have any questions or you're watching this later and you want to jump in on this conversation, then email us at askwildman@wildmanweb.com. But we've got a meeting here in just a minute, so I think it's about time we jumped off, and
Thanks for reminding me.
we have calendars. We have calendars for this, Mike. All right.
Oh man,
Um,
I've been distracted.
okay. Well,
You got me
Mike,
talking about
thank.
economics. I mean, I was ready to go to lunch, Miles. All right.
Okay. Well, we will be back next week. Mike, thank you as always.
My pleasure, sir.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll be back next Wednesday at 11 a.m. live streaming to our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. So make sure to check in there. And like I said, feel free to send us your questions at askwildman@wildmanweb.com and we'll try to address it next week. I'll see you all then.